Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are all doing well. My name is Andy with Boatworks today, and I believe it's that time. So the issues on these two hatches are almost identical to what I was running into with the cabin top up on this boat here. And the way that I addressed that up top was basically to sand the surfaces down to where there's going to be bare glass in spots. I'm not necessarily going to be taking the entire cover all the way down to bare glass. Just because it's really not necessary. So these areas that are of the worst on here, I'm going to probably address those individually at first, and then I'll come in and basically coat the entire piece with a solid piece of chop strand just to help stabilize the surface. I've got my belt sander. I'm going to be using it's a 4-inch wide belt sander. I've got 40, or is it 32 grit? I got the coarsest paper I could find. I think it's 40. And I'm going to come in and just basically start knocking this off. So let's get started. So I finished grinding at least the worst areas on here, and I've already gone through and wiped it down with acetone now. Before I come in and start laying in my glass patches in here, there are a few of these little spots that have some voids, but they're shallow. So rather than doing more grinding, I'm just going to mix up a small batch of the AdTech. It's the P14 UV. You've seen me use this quite a bit. And I'm just going to fill in just the actual void parts. I'm not looking to build anything up other than I just want to fill in the low spot, so then when I lay in my glass patches, I'm not going to have any air pockets underneath it. So let me get a small batch of that mixed up and get this filled in. It's always a good idea to knead this hardener. It does separate somewhat inside the tube here, so just kind of give it a quick little kneading around with your fingers and should be all set. Right, now I'm going to let that set up for probably 15-20 minutes, then come back, give it a light sanding and another wipe down with acetone, and then we can start filling in these patches. All right, so I think I'm ready to start laying stuff up here. I've got all my pieces of glass, well, at least I think all of my pieces of glass, ripped to size. Got my fin roller, clean, ready to go. Now all I gotta do is just pour up the resin and get that catalyzed, and then, slather this thing up. So I try and remember to mention this every time I'm working with resin, but I don't always remember. But anyways, whenever you've got a can of resin that's been sitting for a while, it doesn't matter if it's a poly or a vinyl ester resin, just give it a good shake. A lot of the solids in here will settle over time, so in order to get the full characteristics of the resin, you want to make sure everything is well incorporated. So just give it a quick shake. Doesn't take much. So while I'm mixing resin, I want to take 30 seconds to tell you about a new downloadable guide that I have available on my website. This is the first of what will eventually be 5 guides, and since this is the first, this is starting at square one of any type of repair, which is going to be trying to decide which type of resin is going to be best for you, whether it's poly, vinyl, or epoxy. I go over the ins and outs of each of these and kind of weigh out the pros and cons, and kind of help you figure out compatibility between different products. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, I will have a link for that download in the description below. And if you check it out, please let me know what you think. Okay, now I'm going to start with this spot here. Actually, I'm going to get both of these spots at the same time. And then I'm going to be pretty generous with the amount of resin that I'm going to put on here, because my After I've got the material down, then I'm going to be going over with a fin roller to roll out not only the air, but also any excess resin in here. So by going about it this way, the glass is only going to be able to hold as much as it is able to hold. So by rolling out the excess, you're going to be left with a pretty lean laminate that is going to be air free. I generally find that when I'm rolling this out with the fin roller, it's best to start in the middle rather than on an edge. If you start on an edge, there's a chance that the glass itself could get wrapped around this roller and then just kind of pull up on you. So if you look here, hopefully the camera's picking this up, but you can see not just the air, but the excess resin that's getting pushed out of here. So that way we know that the glass itself has all the resin that it needs, and we're getting rid of the resin that it does not need. So I've gotten all my glass patches laid up, and it's been about an hour, so this resin has set up, but it is not fully cured. Now in order to do that, I need to top coat it with something. I have some options. I could use some PVA or polyvinyl alcohol, but what I generally choose to do is just go over top of it with some gel coat. And that does a couple of things. For one, the gel coat helps to fill in any of the texture or weave that's in the glass, so I, in the long run, have less sanding to do. But also, I still need to go over top of this gel coat with PVA. And to be honest, PVA is a lot easier to wipe off of a smooth surface like gel coat than it is off of glass, where there's going to be low spots and texture to try and get it out of. So with our material fully cured, now it's time to sand this back down and make it flat again. Now in a second here, you're going to see what I was talking about, how using the gel coat helps to fill in the texture. And by top coating the glass with the gel coat, it's already filled in this low spot right here. If I had not done that, now before I can come in and lay up more glass, I would have to actually fill or fair that little dimple in before I can continue to move forward. So by using the gel coat to seal the glass, I've basically accomplished two steps at the same time. With all the major defects in the glass already taken care of, now it's time to add a little bit of an insurance policy. And for that, I'm just going to be using a larger full-size sheet of chop strand matting, and I'm essentially going to be wrapping this entire cover in one solid sheet of glass. So now the tricky part on this particular hatch is that the corners are, well, there's corners. So I had to do a little bit of tearing and fitting to make sure that the edges would be able to wrap around and come together in a nice, clean radius. Now the resin that I'm using here is still a laminating poly resin, so I've gone ahead and pre-coated the surface. I'm going to lay my glass out. Now what I'm going to focus on here first is to actually get the top wetted out, so at least the fabric or the glass itself isn't going to be shifting around on me too much while I'm trying to get the corners wrapped around. So I'm using just a regular old cheap run-of-the-mill big box store roller, that's resin resistant, so that it doesn't start to melt on me and fall apart. Now on these corners, by tearing the glass along what I guess what I'm going to call the miters, it's going to make this wrapping the glass around these corners actually pretty simple. Think about when you interlock your fingers together, on your hands. The wisps on these pieces of glass that along the tear line, they all kind of interlock with each other and kind of help to hold it down and in place. So this actually went pretty smooth. For this kind of an application, I really think chop strand and using some sort of a styrene-based resin, such as polyester or vinyl ester resin, really is the way to go. It's much more user-friendly than, say, using an epoxy. I mean, don't get me wrong, epoxy certainly has its place, as you're going to see here in a minute, but at least for something like this, in my opinion, it's not the best choice to use. A quick one over with the fin roller to make sure there is absolutely no air underneath this glass, and I think we're pretty much set. This thing is looking pretty sexy. Just as before, I'm going to seal this glass using gel coat. Now, I've had this can of blue gel coat kicking around the shop for probably a year, and it's getting old, so might as well just use it up. I'd rather use it up than throw it away, so I'm turning the hatch blue. After about an hour or two when this gel coat has actually set up, then I'll come in, apply a light coat of PVA, and put it to bed for the night. Tomorrow's another day. So now, as you can see, when I'm sanding this gel coat, I'm not trying to remove it. Actually, not at all. What I am trying to do is just smooth it over and give it a good scratch pattern so that I can get good bond with the next coat, which is going to be, wait for it, still waiting, thickened epoxy. This is West System with their 410 filler, and as you can see, it looks like it's mixed up to about a little bit thicker than ketchup consistency. Now on the vertical sides, I did have to mix up a separate batch that was thicker, and I still use the 410 filler, but to thicken it, I added in some 406, the silica, and those two work together very, very well whenever you're dealing with vertical surfaces that are going to be prone to sagging. Now, after letting this epoxy sit overnight, now it's time to knock it down and start getting things ready for painting. Now, since this top surface is going to be all non-skid, I'm not concerned at all about making sure that this surface is perfectly fair, you know, to a nice little camber over the top of this hatch, because it's really not necessary. You're never going to notice it with all the texture and grit on here. So just a quick sanding, and then it's time to switch gears and get ready for painting. But unfortunately, that's going to have to wait for next week. But until then, I don't want to leave you completely hanging, so here's the quick little sneak peek as far as how the spraying turned out. Not too bad in my opinion. So as always, I want to thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, give me a thumbs up and share the video on Facebook or Twitter or however people do it these days. So, if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to leave those down below and I'll get back to you. And as always, thanks for watching.